The following program contains the opinions of the host, guests, and call-in participants. These do not necessarily represent the views of this show's distributors or sponsors. This program may contain obscene, profane, or otherwise objectionable language. Viewer discretion is advised. Hello, everybody. Come to you cordless. It's Thursday night, January 8th, 2026. I am Jim Peters. Welcome to another edition of Jim Peters at Night, episode number 307. Mark your scorecards at home. Someday there'll be a test. And so, we do the show from Minneapolis. A lot has been happening here the last couple of days, and we'll address that later on. Actually, we're going to address that in the interview even. William Dunn is coming on in a second. But before that, I want to tell you about the fact that here in Minneapolis right now, it's 34 degrees, which means it's above freezing, which means it's January and it's raining. And you know what that's going to mean? It's going to go down below freezing tonight overnight, and that rain's going to freeze, and the roads are going to be just a mess tomorrow. It's going to be unbelievable. Yeah, it's raining here in January. That's crazy stuff. Yeah, our guest tonight is William Dunn. He's a former Marine colonel. He's also the president of Strategic Resilience Group, LLC. They do security for the U.S. government all around the world. And he's the author of his new memoir called Gunfighters Rule. Now, as we do with most of our interviews, we tape this afternoon. He's a fascinating guy. We talked about a lot of stuff. We talked about Venezuela. We talked about Iran. We talked about Cuba. And we talked about what happened here in Minneapolis, too. And also, pardon me. I'm going to address that in the JimCast after the interview, too. I have to. We're here. So now, we only did 2 shows this week. I've said for the entire month of January, we're only going to do 2 shows a week. And actually now I'm thinking I'm lying because next week we're only going to do 1 show. And to make up for that, I'm thinking maybe the 3rd week of January we might do 3 shows, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Because we can't do Thursday on that. So we're going to do Monday and Wednesday. So I know it's confusing. I know that. And no one wants to keep track of this. No one does. Anyway, I don't know who our guest is going to be on Monday. We're going to do a show for sure. I'm 95% certain who we got. Haven't confirmed it yet. But what I really want to tell you about is the guest is going to be on the following Monday, January 19th. Now, this may not mean anything to you, and this maybe dates me. Our guest is going to be Taki Theodorakopoulos, which you probably, maybe if you've heard of him, you just heard of him as Taki. And during the 1950s and 50s here in the United States, he was a very, very well-known, famous individual. He was basically a professional playboy. And he's Greek. He's Greek by birth, as you might be able to tell from his name. But he spent 4 decades writing the High Life column for London Spectator, where basically he just talked about his adventures running around Europe, drinking and betting women. That's basically what he talked about. Now, he also co-founded the American Conservative magazine with Pat Buchanan in 2002. He founded Taki's magazine, his own magazine, in 2007, which is still running online at takimag.com. That's TAKIMAG.com. takimag.com. And he's written for Esquire, National Review, Vanity Fair, London Sunday Times, and New York Post. And the real reason he's coming on the show is because he has a new book out called The Last Alpha Male. And yes, if anybody was an alpha male, it would be this guy. He's 89 years old now, and he's going to be talking to us from Switzerland, of all places. We've done I had a few remote interviews from England, but we've never gone that far. And then we had one, James Bradley joined us from the middle of the Indian Ocean, and that worked. That worked just fine. So God bless the internet, and God bless Al Gore for inventing it. So we're going to be talking that's going to be a week from this coming Monday on January 19th. He was originally supposed to be on next Monday, but something got screwed up and we had to change it. So yeah, so that's going to be kind of interesting. I've had okay, so we've done 307 shows. We've had this is a rough count. We've had on roughly 250 guests, and this guy would probably rank in the top 5% in terms of renown or fame or whatever, however you want to put it, or prominence, importance. I don't know. Uh, he's definitely up there. So I'm really, and I spent most of my youth traipsing around Europe. Of course, my thing is I quit when in my early 20s, and he didn't. He made a career out of it. so, yeah, it's gonna be kind of. I'm really looking forward to talking to this guy very, very much. But our guest tonight is William Dunn, and this is a fascinating interview. I hope you should stay tuned and listen to it, and you're gonna have no trouble doing that because it's gonna happen in 12 seconds. Joining us from his home office in Littleton, North Carolina, retired Marine Colonel William Dunn. Bill, pleasure.
Well, thanks for having me. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm going to read off a little of your credits here. You're a decorated Marine Corps combat veteran, and you were an attack helicopter pilot. I want to ask you about that in a second. You're the president of Strategic Resilience Group LLC that advises the U.S. government all over the world about private critical security operations, and you graduated from Old Dominion University and Boston University with degrees in business administration. Oh, and then you have a book out called Gunfighters Rule, and here it is. That's the cover of your book. But my real question is, I'm a little unclear on this, Bill. Is this fiction or nonfiction?
Oh, it's nonfiction. Yeah, it's about my time in the Marine Corps. Spending time in Iraq as both a forward air controller, as in a squadron commander of the Gunfighters, HMLA 369. And then it talks about some of my youth growing up and some of the challenges I had as a young lad. And then I joined the Marine Corps when I was 17. So kind of goes through all of that.
Yeah, I couldn't quite tell if you fictionalized it or not from the descriptions. I couldn't quite tell. But so, yeah, it's a memoir basically, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You know, so I was preparing this earlier, and this sounds like an odd question to start with, but it occurred to me. I mean, your credentials are very impressive, and I thought, well, I suppose there's a possibility somebody might not believe it. What do you think about people who fake their military? Now, I know your credentials are real. I know that, but yeah. What do you think about people who fake their military history? What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's disgusting. Absolutely. You know, and here's the thing, right? If you've been in the military, you know almost immediately if someone's faking their military service because you just know and understand it. And yeah, everything in there's actually real.
Yeah, the other thing I want to ask you, and I ask pretty much all my military-based guests this: are you under any current security restrictions regarding classified information or anything you can't talk about?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, that's good to know.
Yeah, absolutely. There's and it's very simple. If I can't talk about it, I won't.
Right. That's why I figured you just bow out. Yeah, so
that's right.
All right. So the first thing I wanted to mention, ask you about today is this whole thing in Venezuela. Now I got to tell you, I am absolutely awed by how they pulled this off. It's really freaking unbelievable that you can go into a place, a compound in the middle of a country, pull somebody out, and 7 hours later they're in New York City, and nobody gets hurt. Well, at least none of our guys got hurt. You know, so. How do they do this?
Well, you know, that's a great question. And the first thing for all the listeners and for the American public, that is what you should expect out of your military when we're under this current administration. This administration is allowing the warriors to do what warriors do. And it's very important to understand that this is how, you know, I won't say every single member of the military, but this is the expectation of every member of the military, both conventional forces and covert forces, the special ops guys. We train, we plan for any possible requirements. And then when we get the call, we go and execute it. And what they did was amazing, very impressive. But I would suspect that not a single person doing that mission expected mission failure. Every one of them expected success. They plan for it, they train for it, and they make it so, it can't fail. Now, obviously, sometimes bad things happen. They're prepared for that. And we have to be able to adjust on the fly if something goes wrong. And you've heard some of the reports. One of the helicopters got hit.
Yeah.
I think there were some at least light injuries, but these warriors go in, and if their aircraft gets hit, they have a plan, and they were able to bring that aircraft home, and that's what they're trained to do, and that's what they expect of each other, and that's what the nation should expect of our military.
Okay, but compare that to 50 years ago when the Iraqis held American embassy hostages. Carter tried to send in a mission, and basically it failed. And not only did it fail, but I think people even died. I know they crashed a helicopter and all this sort of stuff. So what's the difference between was that just bad luck, or what's the difference between then and now?
Well, and that was Iran, the Iranian hostage.
Okay, excuse me. Yeah, I was getting that confused. Sorry.
Yeah. So Iran, and I've read that report years and years ago, and basically it comes down to it wasn't necessarily bad planning. They did not have the appropriate equipment, and it literally went down at one point to having goggles on a guy's face that was directing an aircraft. And so the equipment we have now is so much better. And I would tell you that I'm very confident we could have done Desert One today with just as much success as we did with Venezuela. We could not have probably done Venezuela 50 years ago because the equipment is just not good enough. Yeah, and so when that's the case, you do it a different way. But right now we have pretty outstanding equipment, and I think the warning I would go to our adversaries is we can do that anywhere. We can go do a strike like we did in Iran anywhere, and obviously we have ways and we have training and plans in place to defend our nation against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
The rumors have been that part of the Venezuelan military was paid off. Is that true, or do you know about that, or do you think that's likely? Or
I don't know officially. I have no inside information. I am certain the way I would have executed that is I would have done that. I would have worked directly with the Venezuelan military, some of the Venezuelan people, and some of the Venezuelan government. I don't know if we'll ever be briefed on that, but that's how I would have operated, and I think that is a likely scenario.
And then there's also the rumor that the current vice president, everyone was expecting Machado, the woman who was running for president against Maduro, to be kind of appointed president, but Trump insisted that they install Maduro's vice president, and people are wondering why. But the rumor on that is that she actually helped the American government pull this off. Do you know anything about that?
I don't know about that. What I would tell
likely,
you,
though?
I think I wouldn't say likely. I would say possible.
And
so when we did regime change in Iraq, right, and I was part of that in OIF-1, and I talk about that quite a bit in the book. After when if you remember when President Bush said major hostilities had ended in OIF-1 in 2003, well, our battalion went from Baghdad to Karbala. And what we did there is we ran what's called a civil military operations center. We basically helped the Iraqis run their country. Well, one day we were told, fire the military, fire the interim government. When you do that in any country, whether you're trying to help or whether you're in there in war like Iraq, but when you do that, you allow the citizens of that country to go willy-nilly because there's no more command and control.
Right.
We cannot allow that to happen in Venezuela.
Right.
What I suspect, they leave the government that's there now, which proves this false narrative of regime change. It was not regime change. The same regime is there, less the criminal. And so they leave the government as is. Now we can hopefully work with that government. And I don't know that the current regime will change or stay, but that's going to be up to ultimately to the Venezuelan people. So here you have a scenario where we've went and got a criminal. The vice president takes over because that's their country. Now, hopefully that vice president, who's now the president, will work with the U.S. And I believe we will see a peaceful transition to a new government that was officially elected. And I think we'll see that sometime this year in 2026, I hope.
There's been always the talk that when you're talking about Iraq in 2003, that the big problem that the Bush administration did, which I think you're alluding to, is they tried to basically install a democratic government ASAP, and that culture wasn't used to that. Or like you said, because of that, the whole thing broke down because they literally didn't know what to do. Is that am I on to something there?
Well, you are. And so one of the things, and when I was in a war college, I wrote a paper on centers of gravity and how we were unable to reach the center of gravity of Al Qaeda, right? And I still to this day believe we were unable to do it because they're still out there. So what we did is we used a Western mindset into a Muslim Middle Eastern country. And
Right.
we assumed that the people wanted to democratically elect their leader. And in reality, and I spoke to many Iraqis through an interpreter, all they wanted was a leader that didn't beat them up or try to kill them.
Right.
They didn't care about Saddam Hussein if Saddam Hussein, they were fine having Saddam Hussein if he wasn't beating them up and killing them. When the country started to get to that point and his terror really hit its people, then the people helped us in Iraq. And so probably some similarities with a dictator in Iraq as a dictator in Venezuela. The biggest difference is our process post head of the snake. We cannot, I would, no one's asking me, right? No,
Well,
no,
I am. I'm asking you.
the government's not asking me, but I would tell and I would recommend to our current administration: do not fire the government in Venezuela. Do not fire the military.
My
Work with them.
my family background is Yugoslavian. I'm a first generation American, and of course, Marshal Tito
That's right.
ruled Yugoslavia after the war, and he's considered one of the very few benevolent dictators in the world in world history. And of course, the thing here, and just alluding to what you're talking about, he was a dictator, but he basically left the people alone. Because of that, they were fine with it.
That's right. And
Yeah.
if a human, unfortunately, right, because you talk about the socialism and communism of the world, if a human, an average human's needs are met, and you don't beat them up, throw them in prison, and you just leave them alone, well, then they're willing to accept socialism or communism very easily because it's becomes human nature to them, and that's what they're used to. That's why we can't have it in America, because what happens? It always goes wrong. We can't find a scenario, and I don't know of one, where communism or socialism has worked long term. It can work short term until the money
Right.
runs out.
Well, right. It's the whole thing that Margaret Thatcher said, sooner or later you run out of other people's money. And that's actually true. And I wasn't going to talk about this, but let's actually go to Iran right now, because their government seems to be falling apart, and it seems to be primarily based on economics. I can't remember what's the name of their currency, the real or something like that.
Yep.
Yeah, it's basically completely crashed. And it gets back to what you're talking about. When you start to screw with the average person, they get really mad.
Well, I would say this, and I'll be careful how I say this, but when in my time in the Marine Corps, at one period of time, the plan that I believed we were looking to do is just have the Iranians overthrow their own government.
Right.
Right.
And
we were there.
Yeah.
We were there. It was falling apart. It was working because if many people don't remember this, but Iran used to be our friend.
Mm-hmm.
We were very friendly with Iran back in the day. And in one of my deployments, I was flying in a Marine Corps EA-6B aircraft by Iran, and they locked us up with one of our own weapon systems that we gave them, I think in the 70s.
That's terrible.
I'm like, really? That's our weapon. Give it back.
That's awful.
It was awful. Now it was a routine thing that they did, and it was not a threat because it was something that all of our pilots knew they were doing, and we were basically used to it. But for me, I'm a Cobra pilot flying in this aircraft for the first and only time I ever did it. That was a little surprising, and I knew what it was because of the sensor we had told us. And I was like, why do they have that? And my Marine told me, he goes, well, sir, we gave it to them. And I was like, oh yeah, I guess we did. So we used to be their friends. We can be their friend again. And that's the one thing I would like the folks that listen in is that oftentimes we as Americans forget that Russia used to be our friend. Iraq used to be our friend. Then they weren't our friend. Then they were friends again. Iran used to be our friend. And China used to be our friend. We used to have very solid relationships. We can get back to that. if we do it properly. And one of the things that I've mentioned on a few of these interviews I've done, I think there should be room at some point for Russia to go into NATO and become part of NATO. Why not? Right? Why not bring our old friend, the Russian bear, back into a friendly relationship? The biggest concern that the Russians have is NATO. So if they're part of NATO, they no longer have that concern. Alleviate that concern from them, and maybe no longer do we have to worry about the Russian bear blowing up. And with what's happened in Ukraine, we've seen that the Russian bear didn't have very bad claws. He wasn't as bad as we thought. So I think that could be a potential solution, although it would take some finesse. But I think it's something we should logically look at.
Bill, I have a regular guest on this show, Jonathan Lockwood. He's a former Army colonel too himself, and he comes on specifically to talk about Ukraine. But the thing he's basically emphasized is how incredibly overrated the Russian army is. He said there's really nothing going on there. Is that what you kind of perceive too?
Well, we studied Russia since I was a second lieutenant in the Marine Corps. We studied Russia, Fulda Gap, all these different scenarios and how we're going to fight the Russians. And I don't remember exactly, but it was like 4-1, 4 or 5-1 on the number of tanks they had versus our tanks. And we would literally go through the process as a Cobra pod to say, at one Cobra would have to kill so many Russian tanks with so many weapons. And we would denigrate our capabilities and say, oh, we started with 20 aircraft. On day 3, we've only got 5 left. And you would go through these scenarios all the way down until the war ends. We wasted all that time because they were terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible. I couldn't believe it. And part of that problem, I believe, is the Putins of the world. And this was the same for Saddam Hussein. When you live in a country where if you give the boss bad news, you might get thrown in jail or killed, you end up giving the boss the news he wants to hear. And so I believe both these leaders, Saddam Hussein as well as Putin, believe their military was 10 times stronger and 10 times more capable than it actually was. And then when push came to shove, they took massive casualties and they didn't know how to fight. And unfortunately, this war's dragging on, and who knows when it's going to end. But how many lives? I think they've lost count. We're definitely into the millions.
Yeah, I mean, it looks right now, this is off the top of my head, that on both sides, about 500,000 people have been lost. I mean,
yeah, I would say at least that.
So what do you think of people? I mean, I don't know if you've had much experience with this, or maybe you've even met the guy. I don't know. There's a lot of people who think in the last 3-4 years, basically Putin's losing his mind. I mean, do you think, literally, physically, he's going crazy? Do you think there's anything to that?
I don't know. I think Putin is a rational actor. I think he's a brutal dictator. They have democratic elections over there, but if you don't vote for him, they kill you.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
Right. So he gets a popular vote every year.
I don't need to point this out to you. There's a difference between being rational and nuts. I mean, he's rational and brutal. I mean, and being nuts. Up till now, up to a couple of years ago, people were saying, well, his moves seem to reflect self-interest, even though, like you said, he's extremely brutal as hell. And now there's people who say they don't. It doesn't. And he's basically just lost it. Do you think there's anything to that?
I don't think there's enough evidence to support that he's gone, mentally crazy. I still believe he's a brutal actor. I do think he's rational. If he was not rational, I think he would have done different ways of fighting in Ukraine, and his losses would be tenfold.
What's it like?
Hey, I don't think he's crazy.
What's it like flying an attack helicopter? What's that like?
Oh, it's awesome. I love it. It's amazing. I still go back in time very often and flying a Cobra. It's it's in pilots, any pilots that are listening will know this, whether you're a civilian pilot or a military pilot. The smell of jet fuel, JP5, JP4, whatever you're using, is very prevalent. And when you smell that and you smell the aircraft, it's got this great scent to it, and it's wonderful. So I love it. I loved it all. And if I could go back and fly a Cobra today, I would do it. And I probably could. I could probably get one started, and I'm sure I could still fly it pretty well. So
do you think Maduro is crazy?
no, not at all. I think Maduro was a criminal, and I think he was making a ton of money in the drug trade. I think he destroyed his country. He shut down his country's oil infrastructure. That's why they have so much oil. And he enriched himself at the expense of his neighbors and at the expense of his people. And because what he did is sort of a destabilizing factor in the region. And obviously, he supported the movement of drugs into the United States. It's killed untold amount of Americans. And, I've heard the argument that if an American's taking drugs and they die, it's their fault. Well, there is some truth to that. But when they're pumping in fentanyl with the purpose to hurt Americans, we need to stop it. And I'm glad the president's doing that.
Well, if you don't mind my bringing this up, I mean, I kind of count myself as a libertarian, but there's one thing I disagree with most libertarians on, and that is, that people say you should have the right to take drugs. But the problem is, if you start taking addicting drugs, you lose your free will. I mean, that's once you get addicted to a drug, you have to have it, and that basically creates the market. People
then also creates the crime.
Yeah, right. It does.
If drugs were free and you could just give someone drugs until they died, basically, right? If you just give it to them and give it to them and give it to them, there'd be no crime.
Yeah.
But they're very expensive. And, I was watching one of these shows the other day. It was called Lockup or something, right? It talks about these prisoners in different states. I just happened to be, flipping through the TV. Every person just about was there because they were successful. They got into drugs because they were wealthy. Some of them were very wealthy. And now, next thing you know, they're in prison for anywhere from 5 years to life in prison for different things they did because of the drugs. So they terrify me. I'm glad this administration is doing something about it. And I just wish the rest of the American people would get behind it on both sides to say it's not fair or right for our citizens and our children to die by drug overdoses that are being flooded into the country.
Well, since you touched on this, I'm going to bring this up. The political situation right now, it seems like we have one party that's against whatever the other party's doing. That doesn't, I don't quite understand that. It isn't like years ago where Tip O'Neill and Reagan could argue and then go off and have a drink. It's like, it's a different, and I don't know that would be an hour discussion.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I don't know what causes this, but I have some ideas. But at any rate.
Well, in the military, right, we're supposed to be agnostic. We're supposed to be agnostic when it comes to our civilian government, right? So, yeah. I'm a Republican guy. I've been one. When I was a kid, I actually thought I was a Democrat until I learned the difference. And I would literally, and I'm serious, I was like a Democrat. Oh, I'm a Democrat. And then I would watch as I grew up and would watch even TV back then when I was little, and all the stuff the Republicans were saying were the stuff that I believed in. And I was like, oh, I guess I'm a Republican.
Right.
But we've had plenty of both Republican and Democratic presidents, and I saluted and took the orders from both of them or all of them because that was my job. And, your job as you serve at the pleasure of the president of the United States when you're an officer in the military or when you're in the military. And so it shouldn't matter. I had a great conversation today with an active duty Marine colonel that he was active duty during the Biden years. And he said immediately the day Trump won the election, all of the crap that was going on in the Marine Corps stopped, the bad stuff. He goes, it was night and day.
Well, can you describe what some of the bad stuff was?
Well, some of the DEI programs, he was telling me stories of inspector general complaints were coming rampant. And so they were ending people's careers. And so now when the Trump administration came in, the inspector general can still investigate, but they put some, what I would consider safeguards on it. And so this is just one man's perspective. And he just told me that it was just a very positive change throughout the Marine Corps on that day. And it should never be that. It should be transparent who the president is to the military.
Well, I don't have to tell you this. I mean, during the Biden 4 years, the recruitments to the military went way down, and they immediately jumped up as soon as Trump was elected. I mean, there seemed
that's right. And here's the deal. Every American parent, it shouldn't matter whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, it shouldn't matter race, religion, whatever. You should demand, if your children join the military, you should demand that no social program is put in place and only the best, regardless of race, gender, and age or whatever, but only the best of the best command and lead your sons or daughters. And every American parent should demand that. A brother and sister should demand that when a pilot is flying your child in the back of a CH-53 or a Osprey, or they're flying with a co-pilot and a Cobra, that only the best are flying and only the best crew chiefs, gained by meritocracy only. And if you are the best of the best, it doesn't matter if you're a man, a woman, what color you are, what race you are, what religion you are. It doesn't matter. The best of the best is the best. And those are the only people that should be commanding and leading our sons and daughters, period.
I'm looking at you and thinking about other people like this. I've always kind of thought that people that sign up for the military, especially now that we don't have a draft, people that sign up, it's basically a calling. I mean, do you feel, it's kind of like calling to the priesthood or whatever. People just kind of feel it. And then, during the Biden administration, I think there's a lot of guys who said, I want to join the military, but I'm not going to join if I have to put up with this bullshit, and so that they literally pulled themselves out of contention, which is terrible. Because the thing is, you need people like you who feel the calling to do it, because otherwise who's going to do it?
That's right. And here's the sad thing, right? Here's the sad thing that people need to understand. That we say a thing in the Marine Corps, our dress uniform is called the dress blues.
Uh-huh.
And they say the dress blues come in many sizes, but they don't fit everybody. And what we mean by that is you may want to be a Marine more than anything in the world, and you just may not be physically or mentally capable of doing it. And that's unfortunate, but we have to be very selective. During the Biden years, it seemed, and I don't have any empirical data to prove this other than what I've heard from my friends that are still
I don't either. So, yeah.
Is that you could get in the military and do things in the military and get promoted, not based on your meritocracy.
Right.
And so now when you get promoted during a regime like that, now how do you ever know if you were really the best? And that causes it causes a fracture in how we treat each other as Marines and military folks. So as long as we stay best of the best, meritocracy gets you promoted, gets you advanced, then I think we're on the right track. And I just hope we never go back. It puts people's lives in danger.
What do you think about this video that these 6 Democrats filmed a couple months ago about define what they called illegal orders, in the military?
Yeah, and so I have some significant thoughts on that. First of all, what they said is 100% true. I'll start with that.
Right.
You are not allowed to follow an illegal order.
Right.
Now, in 33 and a half years.
Hold on a second. I have to ask you very quickly. Is that you're not allowed to, or you can choose not to?
No, if it's an illegal order, you not only can you choose not to, you cannot follow it.
Okay, very good.
If you're given a legal order, you cannot follow it.
Right.
Okay. Now here's the problem. 33 years of Marine Corps time. Since I've been retired in 2016, I've been working with DOD. I have never seen an illegal order. Okay. It is very, very difficult to rise to an illegal order. We're talking the My Lai incident in Vietnam, something like that, or go shoot that, kid. That's an illegal order.
Right.
It's very, very, very rare. It's very difficult because the men and women we have in uniform don't give illegal orders typically.
Right.
Now, an unpopular order is definitely not the same as an illegal order. Someone gives you an unpopular order or something you don't want to do, you don't have a choice. You do. You can basically get court-martialed or you do the order. What they did by that statement, and remember, I was a Marine when I was 17. Okay?
Yeah.
How many 17, 18, 19-year-old men and women that join our military are legal scholars and are constitutional scholars and understand even what an illegal order could be? So what they did, in my opinion, is they put doubt and it caused a potential rift in our military to where a young, military member could say, well, shoot, I think that's an illegal order. I'm not going to do it.
Well, Bill, don't you think that was that their intention?
I think that was their intention. And what I would have asked every one of them is, are you going to stand by Lance Corporal Dunn at his court martial when he refused an illegal order? And I bet you they would say, no, they're not going to be there. What they did was very disingenuous, and it was intended, in my opinion, to cause a rift in the military because they don't like Secretary of War Hegseth and they don't like Donald Trump. And it was very terrible.
Yeah, so I think so too. And also now, then this is the part where your expertise matters, especially with Mark Kelly, who was I think of those 6 people, I think 2 of them were actually former military, and I think technically Mark Kelly still is. I don't know exactly what his status is, but
he's retired.
Okay, so he parsed his words extremely carefully. I caught that, but what I don't know enough to know whether he actually said something that was what's the word I'm looking for? Disingenuous or actually like define orders or whatever. I mean, did you catch anything there? Or?
Well, while you're in the military, there's a thing that's called contempt for officials.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know if that's what they're going to try to get him on. So say you are active duty, and I actually don't know if this pertains to retired people, but when you're active duty, you are not allowed to say the president is an idiot.
Yeah.
You're just not allowed to, right? You cannot openly say you're not, for instance, you're not supposed to wear your uniform to any protests. There's a bunch of rules that are covered by the Uniform Code of Military Justice. I don't know if what Mark Kelly said is actually criminal or prosecutable. I don't think it was, because once again, what he said was technically true.
Right.
You shouldn't follow legal orders. You should not. The way he said it in his intent, how do you prove intent?
Right. Correct. Right.
They're going to ask him if they court-martial, they recall him to active duty and court-martial him. Did you intend to deceive the people? No. Okay.
Right.
But I will tell you this, he's supposed to be an officer in our military. And I suspect he knows what his intent was. And, maybe he'll never admit it, but in my opinion, he knew what his intent was, and his intent was to cause discontent in the military. And he should not do that because he knows what it's like to serve. And it's very, very disappointing that he did that.
Yeah. At the very least, I thought it was disrespectful. I don't, you're right. It may not be illegal what he said, or, court-martialable. I don't know if that's a word, but yeah, I was very disappointed.
I was too.
Yeah. So just if you don't mind my changing the subject here for a second, do you have any thoughts on what's going on here in Minneapolis the last few days? So I don't know if you've seen the videos.
I did. Well, first of all, it's very unfortunate. Right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, it is.
And here's the thing that the people don't understand. They're being used as pawns.
Yeah. Oh, I should tell you, Bill, I'm in Minneapolis. We're in Minneapolis.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yeah. So go ahead.
So I'll be careful how I say this, but one of the things that countries do, to include our country, is we do what's called information operations. And I don't want to get too much into it. It's not classified mainly, but when you see someone online, sometimes they're not people, they're bots.
Right.
And so what's taking place with a lot of these protests is you have a potentially Russian or a Chinese bubba, and they're saying, hey, we're all going down and we're going to go beat up ICE. And they have nothing to do with our country.
Right.
They're trying to incite us. And the pawns, they're literally, the technical definition is they're called useful idiots.
Yeah. Yeah.
So these it's legit.
I know.
You get a useful idiot, right? And I'm not saying this poor woman that's dead is a useful idiot, but I suspect she was somehow manipulated to go down and do this. And for whatever reason, are you going down to protest removing criminals out of this country? But we've got useful idiots that do it. So first, what you've done is you've taken a human being and put them in a scenario that's most likely been manipulated by someone else, somebody with an agenda.
Right.
So now you have a clash. You've got good and evil, if you will. And then the video that I saw, which is probably the same that everybody saw, where she blocked the one vehicle and then she drove away and she was driving right at that police officer. Tragic. I think had he not shot, she would have hit him.
Yeah, so do I.
If he
Right.
had not dove out of the way, she would have hit him. It's not his responsibility to dive out of the way.
Right. Although I'm guessing maybe you think the same thing. I don't think it was actually her intent to hit him, but he's sitting there and she accelerated her vehicle. What's he supposed to do? You know?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. We'll never know, right?
Right.
I think I definitely think she intended to drive away after she was told to
Right.
stop.
That's right. She did.
Okay.
Right.
So she's violating, as I was telling my wife, I go, I think what she did when she sped away before she even started was probably a felony because it's eluding or evading, whatever they call it.
Right.
We cannot have pawns being manipulated by people to include potentially your governor, right? I don't know how you like your governor.
Not much.
But
well, I have to qualify that. I've talked about this on the program before. I've actually dealt with him personally. As a person, I think he's a decent guy. As a politician, I think he's terrible.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure,
so
that. I've never met the gentleman,
right.
But he is clearly inciting people, whether he intends to or not. They've gone down there, and now what you've done is you've taken your citizens and you've got them you manipulated them, whether it's from him, your mayor, or an outside force. They've manipulated people to go put themselves in danger against a legal operation. And so the worst case is they're violating the law. And then the minimum case is they're violating the law. The worst case is you have what happened yesterday, where this 37-year-old lady is dead and she should not be dead.
No,
I believe me, I've seen some people kind of celebrating, if you will. I don't celebrate that at all. I think it's tragic because, she may not have sided with what I believe in my politics, but I bet you she was just a nice person, and she had a family, and I bet you none of them wishes she was dead, and she's gone for what? Because someone manipulated her and that crew to go down there and mess with ICE. And they need to get the word out. Stop being a useful idiot. Stop letting people manipulate you to go protest when they don't care about you.
Well, even 5 years ago, I would say the vast majority of the public hadn't figured this out. But now I think people are starting to realize that people are just being manipulated. And not only that, there's no purpose to this. None of those protesters are going to stop ICE from doing what they're doing because it's a completely legal operation, like you said. They're not going to. I mean, there's really no purpose to it. And then on top of that, forgive me for pontificating, but I think a lot of this a lot of this is being organized to try to convince the general public that there's more people that think this way than actually do.
That's right.
I mean, all the surveys I've seen, the only thing that Donald Trump was underwater on is the Gulf of America thing, which is kind of hilarious. In every other instance, the majority of the public seems to be with his policies, and so they're trying to convince people that more people think this way than actually do. So I don't know.
Well, that's a typical information operation, and if you go back to Nazi Germany in the 40s. And the travesty that they did, they got human beings to do terrible things to other human beings for no other reason that they were Jewish. And they did that through this methodology. And so imagine if you think everybody, you're thinking, gosh, I think this is terrible, but everybody believes it. Everybody thinks ICE is bad.
Right.
Everybody thinks Donald Trump is bad. And next thing you know, you get on board. And what you're doing is you're being manipulated, and that's how you run information operations in one aspect of it.
But it's obvious that people are figuring this out only because Trump won the election so convincingly. I mean, I don't want to call it a landslide, but it was definitely what's the word I'm looking for? Undeniable. I mean, he definitely won. So
well, what we as a nation need to do, in my opinion, is that we need to get away from this terrible rhetoric, calling the Republicans Nazis, calling the Democrats all these different things, right? We just need to stop that because we are one nation. And, obviously this is nirvana, but what about the days when you disagree with somebody and then you still voted what you thought was the right thing to do? And I would tell you, and I wish somebody would do this, right? And I think you'd see it. If you had a Democrat come out with just an outlandish idea, like horrible, that nobody would ever do, and that became their talking point, I believe, maybe with the exception of Fetterman and one or two others, that every one of them would vote for it, because that's what they have to do. And before, I remember seeing the votes on the House floor for, years ago, where you would have, 25 Democrats and, many Republicans vote and vice versa. And so it was maybe most of the Republicans hated it, but enough liked it to get it done. And then they would do that. And then the other side would do things for the same reason, because that was right for the people. We don't do that anymore.
No, well, the irony is the Republicans often vote against their own. I mean, it just happened like today, this morning, if I'm right. I think half a dozen Republicans bolted from some bill or something. I can't remember what it was. Something to do with it might have actually been the using the War Powers Act in Venezuela. It might have actually been that.
Yeah, I haven't seen that. I've been traveling all day, so I didn't see that.
But you're. I mean, I hate to say it, and I'm making a generalization, but it's almost always true. The Democrats vote in a block. They just do. It's a high block.
If it was like we're going to we're going to surrender New York City to China, and they would all vote yes, because that's I go into that useful idiot statement, right? They follow blindly, and the one thing that you should never do is follow someone blindly, and that's it goes kind of back to those illegal orders, right? You don't when you swear an oath. You swear an oath to the Constitution, not to a human being, not to the president, not to your commanding officer. It's to the Constitution. And that's where you get into this thing about the illegal orders. It's just so rare that an illegal order would come out because of the way the system is put in place. Doesn't mean it doesn't happen. I've never seen it. So I would just wish we could work together. Maybe one day we can.
Do you think that's going to happen anytime soon? When soon, I mean, the 20 to 30 years.
I think so. I think what will happen, I think what will happen is there'll be an event like a 9/11 event. Unfortunately, there'll be another 9/11 event somewhere, whether it's in our country or in the next, and we will come together to fight a common enemy. Unfortunately, it seems to take that for us to come together, and that'll hold us together. It'll be cohesive for a period of time. And then we'll drift apart, and then something else will happen, and we'll drift back together.
I don't have to tell you this. Probably, Reagan said at the United Nations, he thought it'd be the extraterrestrials. And I have to tell you, we talk about a lot that on the show because I'm absolutely convinced they're coming here. I really am, totally. So, I've also always said, so you can think I'm crazy. That's fine. I've also always said that I think at some point, though, if that happens, the U.S. government is going to use that as a false flag operation to raise taxes.
Well, I don't know. I haven't seen any evidence of an actual extraterrestrial, but it does seem unusual that there would just be one world when there's so many stars out there. So I don't know. Maybe we'll see. Maybe we already have, right? Area 51. Maybe they're here. We don't even know it.
Well, can I ask you about the stuff that happened in the Nimitz in 2004? Are you familiar with all that? That's pretty, about these flying Tic Tacs,
Yeah, I've seen those videos. So I was at Biggs Army Airfield, which is one of the most, for anyone that's ever been to Biggs Army Airfield, it's a very, looks like a very desperate place.
Uh-huh.
And ironically, what they had there was a flying saucer. Sitting in a yard.
One of ours, I assume, right?
It's one of ours. It was a U.S. Air Force flying saucer, right?
Yeah.
So, what is the most possible solution to these things? It's something man-made, right? Something that we've made with either we've made it, that's a top secret program, or another country's made it that's a top secret program. To me, that's the most logical solution. I've seen the little Tic Tac video. It's impressive. It's impressive, but and no one's come out and said that it's an extraterrestrial. I've flown a lot of years, a lot of things. I've never seen a spacecraft or an alien flying around.
Right.
But doesn't mean they're not out there. I'm not convinced one way or the other, but I've just seen no empirical evidence that tells me that those things are alien spacecraft. Our tracking ability across the entire world from the United States is very, very exquisite. And so you would have to have knowledge. If you were an extraterrestrial, you'd have to have some sort of knowledge and be able to defeat some of the best radar systems that are both EO and infrared, electrical, optical, and radar. You'd have to know how to do that to get into the world without someone seeing you. Sure, maybe they're that sophisticated. So I think the most logical explanation for those things is something man-made.
Yeah. I've always speculated. Well, until recently anyway, my friend, the late great Jazz Shaw, he was a UFO writer. He was connected to the Pentagon. So I always got the kind of skinny from him. But I've always thought this thing that happened with the Nimitz and those flying Tic Tacs, that they were ours, but I think we had them because of reverse engineered crashed extraterrestrial spacecraft. That's what I think. But that's speculation. I'm just thinking, and my entire show, Bill, is based on speculation.
Yeah.
So that's why I want to know what you think.
Yeah.
Facts are one thing, and that's great, but that's news. I actually want to know what you think from your experience, and that's why I'm glad that you talked today.
Yeah.
I want to thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you take care. We'll talk to you soon. All right.
All right. Yes, sir. You too.
Thanks to William Dunn for joining us there. I found him to be fascinating. I'm going to be referencing a little bit of that conversation here in our JimCast here for tonight, Thursday night, January 8th. So I wouldn't be remiss, of course, we do our show from Minneapolis. I have to bring up what happened in Minneapolis yesterday here because it's been dominating the news nationally about this young woman getting shot by an ICE agent. I don't know if you've seen the videos online, and I'm not going to play them because I don't know if I have rights to them or not. But there's two in particular that show the shooting from two different angles. And let's just talk about that immediately because that alone has been controversial, and it shouldn't be. The fact that people are contesting this, I find this ridiculous because both the videos I think are pretty clear. Now, this gets back to the George Floyd thing 5 years ago. Everyone saw the video, Dennis Chauvin putting his knee on George Floyd's neck and him saying, I can't breathe. And everyone looks at that and says, it's pretty obvious. The policeman killed him. I mean, I thought so. I thought the same thing. And it turns out that's not true. It looks like Dennis Chauvin's going to get a new trial because it turns out he probably didn't kill George Floyd because Liz Collin at Alpha News here in Minneapolis, they're an independent news agency, that alphanews.org, if you want to check this out. She looked into this greatly. She did a documentary on it. And I think if I'm right, it's on Amazon Prime, about the fact that there's body cam footage from the officers with him saying he can't breathe well before he got stuck on the pavement with a knee on his neck. He died of a drug overdose, and it was unfortunate because apparently it was coincidentally while Chauvin had his face to the pavement. He didn't die of asphyxiation. So, you look at these videos and you think, well, maybe we're wrong. But you have to do that to preface that because even I thought George Floyd was killed by the officer, and it turns out, he wasn't. And unfortunately, Chauvin's still in jail for this. But there's two different videos floating around. Actually, there's three, but I think one of them isn't particularly good. you can't see what's going on. There's two videos from two different angles of this actual incident, and it's pretty obvious that, excuse me, it's pretty obvious to me, and I think anybody who's watching this, that what happened was that she was blocking the road intentionally, so trying to block the ICE officers. And it turns out now that she was like a trained ICE, resistor, however you call that. And so try to escape the scene, she backed her car up a tiny little bit and then went forward, and she hit the officer. It's plainly obvious in both of the videos. She hit the officer. Now, how much she hit the officer, you can kind of argue about that. He kind of bounced off the hood, is what it looked like. But and then what the thing I didn't realize till today, after I was reading about this, John Sexton at Hot Air was writing about this, about the fact that he actually fired 3 times. So, but the thing is, I'm an expert at what you would call micro timing, and that's because I'm a classical musician. Now, the average person can't discern a moment, quote unquote, a moment, less than a third of a second. But if you're a musician, especially like a jazz musician or a pop, and especially if you're a drummer, micro timing, where you're literally talking about hundredths of a second, plays into that's the basis of music, basically, and rhythm. So I'm watching this video, and I have to say I take umbrage with the Department of Homeland Security saying this was a terrorist. How'd they put it? That she was a domestic terrorist, and that this was a. I don't think she intentionally meant to hit that officer, and I'm basing that on the timing of the event. It does not appear that she had enough time to react. I not only don't think she intended to hit the officer, I don't think she saw the officer. The officer was standing right in front of her car. So she's trying to escape this, and she backs up very briefly, a couple feet, and then puts the car in forward. And I don't think she saw the officer in front of him. I don't think she did. And unfortunately, well, this is the part where Sexton brought this up, and I didn't realize this, that he shot 3 times, and one of the shots was directly through the front windshield. And if that's the shot that killed her, he's absolutely going to get off. There's no doubt about it. Because first of all, even intention doesn't matter here. If you're an officer and a car is barreling toward you, especially if the car is only like 4 or 5 feet away, and you're just going to, what are you going to do? It doesn't matter whether she intended to hit him or not. It simply doesn't matter. And first of all, and on top of all that, she shouldn't have been there in the first place. Her very presence in that scenario was illegal. So she shouldn't have been there. But if he fired, so what happens is that he bounced off the front of the car and onto the side, and it looks like he fired 3 shots basically within a matter of like a tenth of a second. They just went off all the right after the one or the other. And if he fired through the window, the side window, which was open, and hit her, well, then legally he's going to have a much bigger problem. I don't think he still does because of the timing of the event. It happens so quickly. But the thing is, but if the first shot through the windshield killed her, it's an open and shut case, and it should be. You can't. I mean, you got an officer there. Like I said, all you know is a car is coming right toward you, and it's from 5 or 6 feet away. You have like a tenth of a second to react. There's just, and once again, it doesn't matter whether she intended to hit him or not. It simply doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is the car is coming toward you. You got to do something, and you don't have enough time to get out of the way. I mean, he actually kind of proved that. He bounced off the hood and ended up on the side of the car within a 5/5 of a second. So anyway, that's what's going on with that. Then you got the people in our state, Waltz and Fry, Waltz the governor and Fry the mayor of Minneapolis, who are just spreading the most intense freaking bullshit. Fry said, first of all, he said it's plainly obvious from the video that it was not self-defense. And he says anybody who says that is bullshit, and he's wrong. He's either lying or an idiot, one or the other. It's like There's all that too. But the real problem comes with Waltz saying, first of all, Waltz said today, this is Thursday, he says that he's never said anything that incited anybody. And then 1 minute later, he called Kristi Noem, the DHS secretary, an executioner. So what I want to reference is what Bill Dunn was talking about in the interview a few minutes ago, about the fact that a lot of these people do not realize they're literally being played. They're being used as pawns. That is their emotions. They're being used emotionally by people who are trying to control this situation, who are trying to take down the entire United States. That's what's going on here. And I can. Here's the thing with this: you can tell how organic these protesters are literally by the number of printed signs. If the majority of the signs are professionally printed signs that the protesters are holding, the whole thing is staged. If they aren't, then you have a pretty good idea that this is an organic moment here. Now, the protests that happened last night in Minneapolis, at least half the signs were printed, at least. Some of them weren't, though, and God bless those people, because they're pushing a negative narrative here. They literally want to cause chaos and ultimately bring down the federal government. That's what they're trying to do, because then, we need a government in its place, and they will supply that. And that brings me to the other thing. I was going to mention this at the beginning when I started here. Usually, I don't do political monologues here. Usually I talk a couple minutes about politics, and I want to go into other stuff because, first of all, there's news that does not really get reported, which I'm going to touch on in a minute, because although it's actually political, and also it's not my strong suit. The reason I got out of political commentary more or less is because I realized I wasn't that good at it. You got Dana Lash and Sean Kennedy on the radio just completely burning the place up. I mean, I am in awe of Dana Lash's broadcasting abilities. I mean, she is an amazing broadcaster. I can't say enough about her. I can't. I don't have the chops to do political commentary on that level. I don't. What I'm really good at is interviewing people. And so that's why the interview's at the top of the show, and that's why I interview way more people on this program than political. We talk to all sorts of people if you watch the program at all. So, but anyway, today I'm doing an entirely political monologue, even though it matches my criteria that some of the stuff you haven't heard about before. And so you talking about me talking about people wanting to bring down the government. So then let's go to Iran. Now, I don't know if you've been following this, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because this has hardly been mentioned in the mainstream press about the fact that the government or the country of Iran is in complete disarray, and people by the thousands are in the streets in virtually every city. I mean, it's going nuts. They're on the government is on the verge of losing control of the situation. Why? It's the same thing that Bill and I were talking about in the interview. Well, first of all, the money, the Iranian currency has basically hit zero. It's worthless. So trade is basically stopped, and you can't buy anything. Now, if you're a dictator, you want to know let me give you a little a clue here. If you're a dictator and you want to keep your dictatorship, make your people happy. Do that. Make certain they have bread on the table. People are not. They don't have to be rich. They just want to be left. They want to be left alone. The Romans figured this out 2,000 years ago. Bread and circuses. To get into the Colosseum, it was free. You had to get a ticket, but it was still free. You didn't have to pay for it. It was every day. There's entertainment every day. There were bakeries. Food was plentiful and cheap. And not only that, you could pretty much say whatever you wanted. Ancient Rome was probably the most free society until the American Revolution. Probably. So that's a great way to keep people happy. The problem with these dictatorships, and I referenced this in the interview too. Part of my family is Yugoslavian. Marshal Tito, who ran Yugoslavia from roughly 46 to 68, I think, roughly. he was he is basically the poster child for benevolent dictatorship. He was a dictator. It was a dictator government. It was technically a fascist government, but he treated the people well, and he left them alone. And actually, the amazing thing is he's beloved there still to this day. I mean, they loved this guy mostly because he was basically like he was what the Fuhrer in Hitler, what Hitler wanted himself to be, and that is a beloved figure. And he truly was, because the economy ran well, and he basically he left people alone. He didn't round them up. He didn't torture them. None of that crap. They didn't do any of that stuff, and the people loved him. They had food on the table, and they had a place to go to work, and they had a life. And so you can, as a dictator, you can do that. But in Iran, no, they're not doing that, and they haven't done that basically since they took over 46 years ago. The whole thing's been a mess. But now the currency's collapsed. I think it's called the real. I think it is, or the name of their standard currency standard. And the people are openly defying the government and the military. And the real terrible thing is you don't really hear about this in the press in the United States. And I don't know if it's entirely a political reason. Because maybe it's Americans have never found international stuff that sexy until we actually invade, like we did, or whatever you want to call it. We did our action in Venezuela. We're not going over now. Now Trump has actually said, though, and you've probably heard this. He said that if the Iranian government kill any of the protester, he said will intervene. And my guess is he will. And I think that was a bait, because I think they're planning on it. That's my guess, because he said this. They have a history of doing this, and they will start shooting protesters. And so I don't think they can resist it, especially now. It turns out, as of this morning, they turned the entire internet off. The internet off in entirety of Iran, the entirety of the country. So there is no internet. And how people are mad about that too. They did that on purpose so people could not communicate with each other. So you got that going on. Now I need to point out that's a socialist country, right? And then you come over to Cuba. Cuba's doing really, really badly. Now there are some protests going on in Cuba, not to the extent that they're in Iran, but Cuba is also appears to be economically collapsing. Geez, I wonder why. How many times do we have to point this out? Socialism and communism don't work. It's as simple as that. I mean, it's failed every single time it's tried. So don't get me in this democratic socialist crap. Don't. It's like, no, it's the same tune, and it's not going to play well. It's as simple as that. Mamdani in New York, it's astonishing. And I actually said this just before we went on Christmas break, about the fact that at first I thought, when this guy was elected in November or whenever it was, I thought, well, he's not going to have enough skill or power to actually get anything that he wants to get accomplished. And so I thought this might end up being like Bill de Blasio, a real benign, incompetent 4-year term. But now I'm starting to change my mind about that. I think with the people he's put into his cabinet positions and administrative positions, I actually think they could do some very serious damage. But he's a committed socialist, and he's admitted it. Actually, he's a communist. He won't admit to that. He won't, but he does say he wants the state or the government to seize the means of production, and that's the very definition of communism. So, at any rate, that's what reason I bring this up. The reason these governments are failing is because they fail to keep their citizenry happy, and they failed through the fact that they can't prop the currency up, because sooner or later, under communist or socialist rule, money becomes worthless. It's happened every single time. It happened in the Soviet Union. It's happened. It just always happens, and it has to do with the very way that it's designed. That the communism is designed. The woman who's handling the rent control for Mamdani in New York, she has said that the goal is for the state to run all apartment buildings. She said that's their goal. Now, the thing is, well, geez, I lost my train of thought. That's not going to work because uh, because it doesn't work. Well, that's not. No, that's called circular logic, and these politicians are fantastic at it. But yeah, at any rate, well, the thing is, socialism and communism don't generate any wealth. When I mean wealth, I mean money. I'm not talking about like wealthy people. I'm talking. They're literally. Communism is the only economic system that actually generates money. So you can't keep the people happy, and then they rebel. God, who would have thought that? You know. So anyway, that's you, and especially the thing in Iran. I'm guessing you probably didn't hear about that. That's my guess. It's not very. People don't think it's very sexy. Anyway, in Cuba, a guy named Jorge Logano, he's a famous television presenter there. He got on television and he said, you know, it behooves the American government to prop the Cubans up because we are a stable partner in the region. They said you don't have to worry about us. We're not going to attack you, so you should prop up our government. And I just thought I'm listening to this guy. First of all, it's in Spanish, so I'm reading the translation. But I'm thinking I can't think of a more um, a common way to admit defeat than what you've just said. Well, you should prop us up because you know we're not going to do anything bad because we can't because we're powerless. You know, just it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Those are my thoughts tonight. I'm going to leave this or this because, like I said, just weird times here in Minneapolis. Oh, the one thing I forgot to bring up too, and I wasted 2 hours this afternoon trying to confirm this, but I finally did. And I'm astonished this has not made the news yet either, but this did happen, and that is yesterday on Wednesday night. Walt said he threatened to bring to activate the National Guard to keep the ICE agents out. And apparently this afternoon he did do that. So, I mean, and somebody's saying literally we're talking when, you know, this might literally be the definition of an insurrection. It's like the Civil War, where you're going to have the state army fighting the army, you know, the law enforcement. No, I'm sorry, not the army, but the law enforcement of the federal government. It's absurd. It's absolutely ridiculous. And so, yeah, it's because they're just doing this because they want more unrest. They do. They want people to throw their bodies in front of the police and maybe get killed. They do not care. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it. Now, I said at the top of the show, we're gonna have a show on Monday next week, Monday only. We're taking the rest of the week off to take care of some business for the show again. We're doing a show on Monday. Can't tell you the guest is yet because I got to be honest, I don't know because we thought it was going to be the person we've booked for the following Monday, now the 19th, when we come back after that week. Because I'm thrilled to tell you this that we have booked. This probably doesn't mean anything to you because Taki Theodora. His name's Taki Theodorakopoulos. He's Greek, but the thing is, you probably know him. If you know him as Taki. He was very well known in the United States in the 50s and 60s, and basically for being an international playboy. And he wrote about it. That's the thing. He started. Let me give you some things here. He wrote a column for 4 decades called "The High Life" for the Spectator in London. He co-founded the American Conservative magazine with Pat Buchanan in 2002. He founded Taki's magazine in 2007, which is still online at takimag.com. That's TAKIMAG.com. Very entertaining. And he's written for Esquire, National Review, Vanity Fair, the London Sunday Times, the New York Post, and he has a book out. His latest book is called The Last Alpha Male. Now, if you got my timing there, he's 89 years old. But the thing is, this guy, I mean, in his time, the last alpha male is a great title for his book because that's him. I mean, this guy has lived. Holy Christ! So believe it or not, he's calling us. We're going to be talking to him from Switzerland. His house is in Gstaad, and that's actually the reason we had to delay him a week because he could not get to a webcam. Because he's got stuff going on, and he does. I mean, just little things. I mean, I think if I'm right, this guy won the national judo competition for people 70 and over or something like that. I mean, it's unbelievable. He's virile. Let me put it that way. Now, I spent a good deal of my youth traipsing around Europe too, so I'm kind of looking forward to talking to this guy. And he's Greek. I'm Albanian and Yugoslavian, and so we have maybe a little bit in common. You know, the thing about traipsing around Europe is I quit. He didn't, and ended up making a living writing about it. So that's going to be on Monday the 19th. But next Monday, what's that? The 12th. I think I have a guest, but I'm not going to announce anything because we haven't confirmed it yet. But Taki's going to be on the 19th, and that should be actually a pretty cool show. It really should. So I'm going to leave you for tonight and for this week, folks. I hope you have a great weekend. Stay safe if you can. Good night, Uncle Donnie, wherever you are, and good night to you, wherever you may be. I'm Jim Peters. Thanks for watching, everybody. I really appreciate it. Have a nice weekend. We'll see you on Monday.